Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, welcome to Q4Launch's education series. Today we're having our webinar is led by Colin Pearson with Q4Launch, and our title and our topic is 7 little changes that'll make a big impact on your hospitality SEO. So I'd like to thank you for joining us and sit back. We got a lot of content to share, and I think this will be a great day for both of us. So Colin, you want to say hello?
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Hey, everyone. My name is Colin Pearson. I have been working at Q4Launch since 2014. My title is Director of Marketing Services, and I guess we'll dive into it. So if you're ready, Anne-Marie. So who am I and why am I doing this? As I said, my name is Colin. Before I worked at Q4Launch, I worked on and off in the hospitality industry. That picture right there is the family business. It is called the Stanton House Inn in Greenwich, Connecticut. So I have a lot of experience on both sides. And in my opinion, SEO is super important. It is the major focus in terms of getting new traffic, attracting new people. It is really the modern day version of the phone book. So you think back on the times when people were, they created business names like AAA plumbing services or whatever, just to be the first one on the list. And it's very important to me to make sure that people are marketing themselves well as a business. And so regardless of whether you're working with us or on your own, I wanted to make sure that we could provide some really good hints and tools and tricks of the trade to be effective at that, or to keep an eye on whoever is doing your SEO, if it's not you or not us, or to keep us and us honest as well. So the problem with SEO is that it really is kind of mysterious and doesn't make sense to the casual observer, but it doesn't have to be. So without further ado, Anne-Marie, if you would hit the next slide. So the 7 things that we're going to cover today, we're going to first talk about from start to finish, kind of is how I walked through this. So the number one thing to start with is focusing and prioritizing your goals. Next is to establish those goals and how you're going to measure effectiveness. After that is doing market research, and then understanding how visitors, once you understand who your ideal customer is or who your target market demographic is, how those people interact with you on the web, specifically your website. And then some aspects that kind of fold into that, but I separated them out because they're very important, is speed, ease of navigation, and last but not least, and this is really important, is cultivating trust in your brand. So without further ado, so first, to quote Patrick Lencioni, who has written, I should say, a lot of books about business management. He's quoted as saying, if everything is important, then nothing is important. With pretty much everything you do in terms of marketing and your strategy, not just SEO, I highly recommend focusing, understanding what your goals are, and then planning your strategy out accordingly. So, my big thought to keep in mind for anything is that the reason you have a website is to get more people on your property. Don't lose sight of that. So for example, social media posts are fantastic. They're important for brand recognition, for example, but keep in mind what the end goal of that is, as with everything else. So if you're having a hard time coming up with what specifically to focus or what to prioritize, I would recommend for our industry specifically on bookings. In reality, as I said, the reason why you have a website is to get people to show up on your property and pay you money for that benefit. So if your website's not doing that, there's definitely some places to focus. So with tracking bookings in mind, a couple recommendations I have as far as what to track. Some ones that we are doing on our side. One is e-commerce conversions, and that's sounds more straightforward. An e-commerce transaction in this case is basically someone arrives on your site, they interact with your content, and eventually they book, i.e. online, they hand over their credit card, and they've booked their stay. So sounds pretty straightforward, but in reality, it can get a little complicated, i.e. The free tool to track this is Google Analytics. I'm going to mention Google Analytics a ton in this, so just keep that keyword in mind. But if you're tracking e-commerce conversions, sometimes that's straightforward, as in, if your selling platform is on your site, and e-commerce conversions happen then and there, that's pretty easy to track in Google Analytics. But if you have another site, an additional vendor that manages that, then it gets a little bit more squirrely, and it's something you have to work with with them in order to track effectively. Another way to track specific goals and measure effectiveness is phone calls. One tool that I recommend for this one, this is not free, but with Google Analytics, there's limits to what you can really do. But Narrowcast for Navis is a really effective way to measure phone calls. And another one that can be done entirely in Google Analytics on its own is tracking leads and lead conversion on your website. And just to reiterate, what is a lead? It is basically someone who visits your site anonymously, which is the case with pretty much everybody. You can understand demographics, for example, but you won't necessarily know, the name, address, phone number, the stuff that would be kind of scary if a website were actually to collect that unsolicited, for example. But those are, if someone lands on your site, they're anonymous normally. But if they say, oh, this vacation guide, for example, or last minute deals, or, some sort of offering on your site, if they are willing, they see the value of that and they're willing to hand over their contact information in exchange for whatever that piece of value is, those people become a lead, i.e. they're somebody you can contact and kind of, in a helpful way, of course, not a pushy way, help push them down the line to an actual booking. They may not have actually handed over any money yet, but there's more of an opportunity to do so. Because let's face it, if you hand over your contact information to a website, you trust the business that's managing that website to some degree. So the opportunities for conversion are higher than a anonymous stranger that pokes around and then kicks a tire and then leaves. So those are probably a good place to start as far as understanding, your goals for your website, what you want the outcome to be. The other side of understanding like what you're tracking in terms of metrics is that you can then sort of, a lot of SEO is just tweaking and adjusting and seeing what happens. So if you adjust one little thing and then you see an improvement in, if you're tracking phone calls, an increase in phone calls from your SEO campaigns, I mean, that's a measure of success. But if you see a decrease after the fact, well, you will very clearly be able to say, oh, well, that didn't work out as well as I thought. How do I tweak? How do I adjust? How do I improve? Once you've established what you're measuring and what you're tracking in the big scheme of things, the next step is doing your market research. And this is kind of really, in the SEO world, this is basically keyword research, but there's so much more to it than that. But that's usually what people throw this into. This is a matter of understanding who your target demographic is. And I usually recommend, if you're trying to understand who your quote unquote ideal customer is, to focus on who currently stays with you and try to see if you can see trends or something in common across those lines. And when I say ideal customer, I mean, who do you like staying with you? Who shows up, spends a lot of money, comes back next year, tells their friends, tells their family, highly recommends you to everybody in their circle, who's a pleasure to interact with, whatever it is. And sometimes you can start to find some correlations between them. In my experience, it's easier to go for people who are similar to your current customers than it is to change and go after entirely new demographics. So, for example, I am in my 30s, I am unmarried, so I as a target demographic am different from, Anne-Marie, who is married. I will not say her age, but she is kind of in a different realm. And she is also different from someone who is a woman who is in her 50s, living in DC. She has 2 kids and a dog and a husband, and she's looking for a place to go near to the DC area within, let's say a 6-hour drive. So how you target that person, how you target Anne-Marie, and how you target me are very different. I'm in my 30s, so what I want from a vacation is very different from someone in their 50s with kids. And also where I am online is different. To use a non-digital frame of reference, if you're trying to target somebody in their 30s, maybe go to a bar or a stadium or something along those lines, their job. Whereas someone in their 50s, potentially a family, the head of a family household, maybe you show up at their schools, you go to The local coffee shop. I don't know. I don't know women in their 50s in DC as well as I do myself. But knowing that is kind of important in order to strategize on how you're going to get more of those people in the first place. So if you don't have that information, you got to get it. And so as you see up on the board, some free tools to figure out who your ideal target demographic is, and this can be as broad or as specific as you like, as I said in there. You know, to give my example of a woman in her 50s with kids and a dog in DC. Look over your records, your own business records, i.e., you know, I'm sure you have records of some kind of like who stayed with you, how long, how many times they come back, et cetera, et cetera. Other one is your brain. My experience is sometimes we'll talk to a customer and the customer will tell us how, you know, they get tons of millennials and they love millennials. And in reality, the records don't actually match that, but that kind of implies to me that they want more, whether they get them or not. So how do we adjust our marketing strategy to target more of those people? And then the other free tool, relatively speaking free tool, it does require your time, is your customers. Pick their brain. You know, the ones that customers that you have a really good rapport with, that, you know, stay with you a lot. As I said, they recommend you to other people. Why do they recommend you to other people? What's so great about you specifically as a business? And so in reality, a lot of this is not just understanding your marketing strategy, but also your operations. What aspect of your business is your secret sauce? Like, and if you were to cut that out, you'd be killing the goose that laid the golden egg, and, you know, having to start your business from scratch and reestablish who your fans are and why they like you and whatever. So spend a lot of time on this step because it is very important. Once you've done that market research and you better understand how, you then need to understand how they find you. Oh, thanks, Emery. Anne-Marie's changing the slides, by the way. That's why I keep thanking her.
It's my pleasure to serve you, Colin.
I.e., it's more than my mind can handle all at once. But I am very singularly focused a lot of the time. So Anne-Marie has been very kind in doing that for me. So understand how those people find you in the first place. The first free tool to do that is, again, to ask customers. You know, it's as simple as having a form saying, you know, when they book, saying, how did you find us? Google, Facebook, you know, Chamber of Commerce, whatever it is that you think is pretty common. Problem is, people don't always answer, or they answer incorrectly, or they don't remember, or whatever. So you do have to have some other tools to compare to in the end. Again, the one that I highly recommend is Google Analytics. A couple of the areas in there that I recommend poking around in for your business. And obviously this is assuming that you have Google Analytics properly installed on your site to track these. We're not going to get too deep into that in this webinar. But, you know, we at Q4Launch are happy to help you set up Google Analytics in your site if you don't have it. Or walk you through this process if need be. But first, go into, and I'll go through this a little slowly so that you can write it down. As you notice, I don't do a ton of actual notes in my slides. But audience, and then click on the demographic section, as well as geographic location. At the very least, you may not be able to get a name and an address, but you can get an idea of what metro area people are coming to you from, or what city or what town. So that's obviously important to understand, and that can help adjust what you're marketing towards. Like, for example, my family business, the majority of our customers came from either the New York metro area or the Boston metro area. Not surprising, most of the states split between those two, although there's Hartford and New Haven as well. But a lot of our money came from that. So like trying to target California sounds like a cool idea, but may not have actually been an effective return on investment for us. And also kind of squirrely in terms of from an SEO perspective, but sounds cool anyway. Other things to look in Google Analytics would be acquisition and looking at channels or source medium. Those basically break down all the sources for digital marketing, and channels will break it down into specific. So like, even though Bing, Yahoo, and Google are different source mediums, they are all going to get lumped into the organic channel in the channel section of acquisition in Google Analytics. Facebook, TripAdvisor, Yelp, Pinterest, Twitter, Tumblr, those are all lumped into the social media channel of Google Analytics. as another example. And last but not least, I would also recommend looking in behavior and looking at landing pages, i.e. the first page that people arrive on the site when they're visiting your website. That often will also tell you kind of what content people are interested in, and potentially what already is getting a fair amount of organic traffic in the first place. The other one I recommend looking at is all pages. This is also in behavior, and that's to help you understand not just where people arrive, but also what other pages they view. And if e-commerce tracking is set up properly on your site in Google Analytics, you'll be able to see the page value, which is based off of how many people view a page in their process, and then how much revenue is actually earned from those people that view that page, and then it's divided, the calculations in analytics. It's kind of interesting, actually. And that in particular is been interesting for me over the years of making a very minute change to a website, relatively speaking. So one that I can think of specifically was to go through one of our customers. We went through several of their most popular units, both vacation rentals and bed and breakfast or boutique hotels, and we adjusted the all we did was adjust the copy of those unit pages to emphasize why someone would want to book there. So for example, if a specific unit was oceanfront and it had a fenced-in yard for dogs when people travel, obviously this is a perfect place for that woman in her 50s in DC who has a dog and kids, and she wants a really nice place to stay in the Outer Banks. All we did was just make that little edit, and we would see the page value increase of that page, i.e. more of the people who saw that page booked after the fact, which is important. Again, the whole reason why you have a website is to get more people spending money to stay on your property, or properties as the case may be. So the final free tool that I would recommend in this area is Google Keyword Planner. This is once you've established that you want to focus on SEO in the first place. Google Keyword Planner uses the number of people that search within Google based off of keywords that they type in, or search queries, or just questions, and then they provide that information to people. The limitations of Google Keyword Planner are it doesn't really provide you new stuff. So if you go in there and you type in, use my family's business as an example, bed and breakfast Greenwich, Connecticut, it will tell you how many people search for it. And it will tell you if you have a paid AdWords subscription tied to that account, it will tell you how often they search per month. But if you don't have an AdWords subscription, it will give you a range. It'll say like between 10 and 100 people search that per month, for example, possibly. I don't know, I made that up. And it will not give you other alternative suggestions. So it won't say, yeah, that's a great keyword. What about Greenwich, Connecticut bed and breakfast with jacuzzi tubs, or within walking distance, or downtown, or whatever longer tail keywords that might be floating out there. That would be really good ones for you to go chasing after. Google Keyword Planner will not necessarily tell you that. Sometimes, again, you do need to understand how people find you in the first place, or why they like you, so that you can emphasize to that. And because ideally, if John Smith loves you because in that example, you have lots of oceanfront vacation rentals, you want to emphasize how many you have, so that when Jane Doe does a search, she finds that for the same reason. People are uniquely similar, to quote a class I took recently. So now we can move on to planning out that strategy and what it looks like. And so what you want to focus on is setting up your business for how visitors interact with your website. Think about your website as the online version of your business or your house. You want to set up your house so that it welcomes people, visitors, and that they feel like invited and comfortable and not frustrated by their experience. So, to take that example to an extreme, you don't want people to arrive at your front door, i.e. your homepage, and open that door, and the door open so slowly that you just have to stand there and wait for the door to slowly open before you can step foot inside. Or you don't want to open another door in the house and find a brick wall, or you don't want to go up a staircase that goes nowhere. Anything like that. There was a, I always think when I use this analogy, I always think of there's a house in California, I can't remember the name, but it was built by an actress who had lots of money and not a whole lot of sanity to go with it, who was convinced that ghosts were hunting her down. And so to get around that, she had her architect just keep adding on rooms in the house and chambers and hallways that went nowhere. And as I use what I said before, like you open a door and there's a brick wall there and there's a staircase that doesn't go anywhere and like all kinds of stuff. And the whole idea was literally just so that people couldn't find her in her own home. And so if that's how you want to do it, great, but that's not good for business. Just think about your website the way you do your actual office. When people walk in, you want them to know where to go. Because in the end, in terms of search engine optimization, which is what SEO is, Google and the other search engines, they just want to provide the best answer possible to every question that's presented to them by a user. Because in the end, if I go to Google, I ask it a question, it provides a really good answer, and I'm happy with it, I will continue to use Google. I will not leave and go use Bing or Yahoo or Yandex if I'm Russian or whatever it is. I will keep using Google, and in the end, that's all Google cares about, and that's part of the reason why Google is at the point of being 2/3 of all organic searches happen on Google in the United States. They want to maintain that near monopoly power. So regardless of what keyword or query or question or whatever you are optimizing a specific page on your site, you want to make sure that you are providing the best answer to that question that you're trying to answer. And there's a whole lot of stuff involved in that. So how to measure the effectiveness of you cleaning up your house and making it easier to navigate and understand and whatever is, again, a free tool is Google Analytics. I recommend looking in behavior. So the 3 ones that I highly recommend keeping an eye on are bounce rate. And bounce rate is basically what percentage of people will land on a page on your site and not interact with anything and leave. The other one I recommend is pages per session, i.e. how many pages do people view as they're poking around your website? A higher number is better. Whereas with bounce rate, a lower number is better. And then for average session duration is the 3rd one I recommend looking at. How much time people actually spend on your site. Again, a higher number is better with some caveats. Like all things, this is perfect. However, in the case of a high pages per session or a high average session duration, if it's high, it's good, but it also could mean that people aren't really navigating effectively and they don't know where to go, so they're just clicking around, which is pretty frustrating from the perspective of someone who actually uses the web, and not something you want to be doing either. So the first step I recommend in terms of optimizing your site and cleaning it up so that it's easy to navigate and explore is focusing on creating click-worthy headlines. This is a pretty simple, straightforward change. A lot of people don't bother making very sexy headlines, but that's an opportunity for you. You just have to have something more appealing than everybody else in Google search engine results pages. So, if you have a headline that is the best vacation rentals in Winter Park, Colorado, bar none. I'm making this up, obviously. That is a much more appealing headline than vacation rentals in Winter Park, Colorado. Think about it. Which one would you rather click on as a user of Google or Bing or Yahoo? And just adjust that and use it to your advantage in terms of psychology. I remember doing an experiment on this for one of my customers back when I was a CEM. I was a CEM before I was Director of Marketing Services here at Q4Launch. One of my customers was a bed and breakfast in Mystic, Connecticut. And I literally only made one change to a page, and it was changing the title from something very generic to something more appealing and click-worthy. And that alone moved that page in terms of results from the 2nd page of Google to the 1st page. There's not an extensive amount of knowledge about what Google search algorithm is outside of Google itself, but there's a pretty clear correlation between, as I said earlier, a bounce rate, number of people, amount of time people spend on your site, how many pages they view, and your rankings in Google. I mean, to go back to that, the whole driving purpose behind Google. If I search the web for vacation rentals in the Outer Banks, I click on your result and I don't come back to Google, that implies that that answer was a good answer. And therefore Google, one-off results like that, not going to change their algorithm. But if thousands of people are clicking on that and they're all staying on your site and not coming back to Google and redoing the search or clicking on a different result, that implies it's a good answer. So you want to make sure that you draw people in effectively and keep them there, and not go back to Google in the end. So a couple free tools as far as making some click-worthy headlines. The one I usually recommend right off the bat is the CoSchedule Headline Analyzer. It is literally just you type in a headline and it will score it based off of its library of words, i.e. It is kind of limited in that regard. It doesn't know specific words. Sometimes it doesn't know location names, anything like that, but it's a good push in the right direction. The other free tool that I recommend is to go to a Google and do a search for the keyword that you're trying to optimize a page for and see what other people are using. That's a recommendation I make a couple times, so I'll just explain it once and then kind of skip over it the rest of the webinar. So if you do a search for bed and breakfast San Francisco, and you type that in and it pulls up, you look in the results and you see what headlines other businesses use for that page. It's just a matter of keeping an eye on your competitors, which you should be doing anyway, regardless of whether you're looking online or whatever. And see what the top results are and what their headlines are in this case. You may not necessarily know the best one, but you can guess that the number 3 result. What about that number 3 result is so good? Because it's definitely a better result than number 7 or number 32 or whatever. So what got them there in the first place? And it's not just headlines, but this is just the first one I'm talking about, so that's where I'm going with this. The next one I do recommend looking at is writing some great meta descriptions. So a meta description is about a 160 character snippet that explains the content of a specific page. Some people will skip this over or just let Google search engines use whatever content they find on the site as their meta description. I do not recommend doing that. Number one, social media platforms use meta descriptions for the same reason. They will pull in that meta description and post it to Facebook or Pinterest or whatever. Those are the 2 major ones that I can think of off the top of my head. So if you don't have a meta description, it will again just pull random text that may not be all that appealing. Also, that 160 characters is really valuable real estate in a search engine results page, because you need to use the headline and the meta description to get across why it matters. Why should they click on your result as opposed to somebody else's in the list? And this is not just a competition between yourself and your other local competitors. It's also a competition against anybody else who goes after that keyword. TripAdvisor, Airbnb, HomeAway, they all likely have a results page on their site that is competing with yours directly in this case. So you want to keep an eye on that. A free tool, again, for that one is a Google search for the keyword and see what other people are using, especially those top results. And if, same thing with the headlines, if anyone, a business out there is set up an AdWords campaign targeting that keyword, that's a really good thing to look at, because they likely have a lot more resources to be tweaking, editing, and testing what they're using and measuring effectiveness than you do. So you might as well leverage off of that. And I'm not saying copy it, but at least take it and run with it and improve upon it. Don't get sued by copying them straight up. So that's important. Emery, would you go back? Sorry. There was a whole section in there and I cannot find in my notes. Okay, so content is very important. Once people actually click through to your site from those headlines and just meta descriptions, they're going to want to see something when they get there. And we'll talk about site speed and everything after this, but this is still pretty important. Once your site loads, you want people to be as impressed online as they are by stepping foot on your property. So of course, design is important. One of the major trends of 2017 is that design and expectations for design are much higher than they used to be. It used to be a limit to boutique hotels. They had to have great design. Now it's everybody. Mom and pop bed and breakfast owner, vacation rental management company, everybody's expected to have pretty consistent, attractive design that is utilitarian. And so online is no different. An ugly website or images are going to turn people off no matter how quickly the page loads. So it's very important to keep an eye on that. That said, buttons are pretty, but they don't necessarily do the entire job of getting people to click, for example. The standard mantra of marketing that is taught to people from the get-go when they go into the marketing industry is the 3 rules of marketing are people don't read, people don't read, people don't read. But based off our experience, that's not the case, especially in terms of our experiments where we found that people are much more likely to click a link within text than they are to click an actual button, even if they're right next to each other. So this is all copywriting. It's a lot. Copywriting is an entire skill set. It is, if you were a decent paper writer in college or you write books, that's not copywriting. Copywriters are able to take an idea and they turn it into a picture that will get the reader excited to do whatever the copywriter is compelling them to do. And that is a skill. It is a beautiful skill, and I'm not the expert on it. We have an entire team devoted to that. But it's definitely something to keep in mind in general. When anything that's written on your site needs to be proofed, needs to be edited, needs to make sure that it's compelling in the first place and effectively incorporates emotional words that get ideas across that are more than what's actually written on the page. And then also in addition to that, linking, internal linking is very important. Internal and external linking is very important for SEO. I will talk about external links later on in the webinar, but right now internal linking is important for content specifically. As I said, they're more effective at getting people to click than buttons. They also do provide some SEO value, i.e. if you are linking from one page to another, the anchor text, i.e. the text that's used to imply what the link is about, also kind of gives a hint to readers, both human and bot, i.e. Googlebot in this case, or Yahoo or Bing, that the page we're linking to is about this topic. And so again, it's another hint to Google in this case that this page is a good answer for whatever keyword it is you've optimized it for. A very quick guide to internal linking. We have an entire guide that our content team is trained on when they start here as far as internal linking goes. There's a lot more I could go into just about internal linking, but the major things you need to know is make sure the text used for your link tells human and bot visitors alike to your site what the page you're linking to is about. So for example, Outer Banks Travel Guide is a more effective hint as to what the page you're linking to is about than just vacation guide or travel guide or just guide or whatever. So definitely keep that in mind. Some free tools to measure effectiveness of your content is behavior, again, in Google Analytics. But there really are no cheap fixes for this. If your site is ugly, nobody's probably going to stay to read what you have to say. If your images are not attractive of your property, but your website is beautifully designed, that's still not effective. People will still probably decide to book elsewhere because I'm sure unfortunately, one of your competitors probably has better images, for example. And so then all of this is for naught. But that being said, it's okay if you're not a great writer. You have lots of other things to worry about, i.e. your whole business. Make sure you hire someone who is effective at that and know what effectiveness looks like in terms of copywriting so that you can provide guidance to whoever it is you're working with so that they can improve. Again, back to Google Analytics and behavior. All right, let's see. Next up is site speed, I believe. This is becoming more and more important for everything digital, not just search. because more and more of what's happening online is happening on a mobile phone. I do a lot more searching on my mobile phone now than I do my desktop computer, and that's pretty standard across the world. I mean, let's face it, it's cheaper to buy a mobile phone than it is to buy a whole desktop. So more and more people who either can't afford a desktop or don't want to spend the money are just going to get a phone and navigate that way. So you want to make sure that the user experience on a mobile phone is as wonderful as on a desktop, and both of those are as wonderful on a tablet and are as wonderful when they step foot on your actual property and interact with you as a business. So it's all really about just the digital world, both from an SEO and a social media and email marketing and whatever perspective, is all about removing as many frictions as humanly possible. Both frustrations and then also like any limitations that cause people to pause before actually spending money with you. A good general rule of thumb in terms of site speed, i.e. how quickly the site loads on any platform, on any device, is under 3 seconds. The better answer is better than whatever your competitors have as far as site speed. This is, as I said, becoming more important. It also opens up a lot of competition in this regard. So to use my comparison before, if you're competing against TripAdvisor, Airbnb, and HomeAway, if they have the exact same content on their site, it just loads faster. Well, unfortunately, that's going to be who people go with. If yours loads just a second longer, that could be enough to be the straw that broke the camel's back and make people not want to come anywhere near your site. So work on avoiding that as much as possible. The free tool I recommend to track this is Google PageSpeed. There are some limits to this though. Google's homepage itself does not score well in the Google PageSpeed test. Try it out. But that said, it is helpful. It is a free tool. You get what you pay for. Some standard recommendations on that site on Google PageSpeed test will make your site load insanely fast. However, it will provide a terrible user experience. For example, one of the recommendations is always to shrink images down to the point where they either don't exist or are just so tiny that they can't even be viewed effectively. And that's not a good user experience. I recommend, yes, again, this is a tool, but talk with your webmaster about this and make sure that they're on the same page with you and can effectively explain to you what will matter and what doesn't. For our sites, we generally shoot for a score of 70 in Google PageSpeed out of 100. Higher than that, we find that usually the return on investment in the extra work of getting it past that is not an effective use of resources for our customers. So that's generally what we shoot for. Next up, ease of navigation. Number one, again, as I said before, make sure your site's mobile friendly. It's 2017. I don't even need to go into this much because it's just kind of a done deal at this point. If your site's not mobile friendly, you are missing out. Even if your local competitors are not mobile friendly, all of the big travel focused websites that you are also competing with are. Airbnb has its own app. I mean, TripAdvisor, all of them, VRBO, HomeAway, doesn't matter. They have a site that is useful on a mobile phone. And so you are stuck. You gotta get it. At the same time, ease of navigation in general is more than just, does your site look pretty and useful on a mobile phone? You also need to make sure that it's easy to poke around. If I randomly land on a page on your site, you want to make sure that I can get where I need to go quickly. How do you determine that? Again, your priorities. Where do you want people to go if they decide to go deeper into your site? The general recommendation is to make sure that no page on your site is more than 3 clicks away from the home page. I would argue in a perfect world that any page on your site should be no more than 3 clicks away from any other page on your site. It's just a better user experience. If someone randomly lands on a page that you haven't optimized and they don't know where to go from there, that is a bad user experience. But at the same time, no matter what page a visitor lands on it, they should easily be able to navigate to where you most want to go. Again, prioritize. So if you're focused on bookings, direct them to product pages, and that can be rooms, specific rental units, or specials or packages, or wherever the pages that you have devoted to lead generation, for example. The other one we've poked around with and found pretty effective is to optimize specific pages for long tail keywords devoted to your major topic. So to use that, one of my examples before, oceanfront vacation rentals in the Outer Banks is a long tail keyword compared to vacation rentals in the Outer Banks. So optimizing a page just for oceanfront vacation rentals in the Outer Banks is a really effective way to provide a good answer to people when they're searching in Google for ocean, in this case, oceanfront vacation rentals, or pet-friendly vacation rentals, or pet-friendly rooms, or whatever they're looking for. Rooms with suites with jacuzzi suites in Chicago, whatever. If you know people are searching for it and you know that those people are likely going to want to stay with you because you offer what they want and need, it's a good strategy. But that being said, you need to know how many people are searching for that, because if nobody searches for a term, that's not something you want to be spending resources optimizing for. A good free tool for this is testmysite.thinkwithgoogle.com. And it looks like I have another one in there. Nope, we're good. Next slide. Cool, now the fun stuff. Cultivating trust in your brand. Think about it, the web is and probably will permanently remain a scary place. You could always run the risk of finding a site, deciding that you want to do business with them, you hand over your money, and then the site disappears. That is still something that exists. So the only way that we can get around that is by improving the trust in our brand in the first place and helping other people, when they're researching you, recognize that you are a legitimate business at a defined location and that you are ready and willing to take on new customers and welcome them to your area. Okay, cool. So by improving trust in you online, it is a lot of just expanding your presence in general. So first off, social media. This is usually the one people focus on a lot. I forgot to mention earlier, part of the reason why I'm so heavily focused on SEO specifically is because once you establish yourself and once you have a very well optimized site that is drawing in a lot of organic searchers, it is basically a spigot that continues to work for potentially years after that initial work. The next time somebody searches for vacation rentals in Winter Park, Colorado, they find you right away, and they continue to find you. It's not necessarily that they know you specifically, but they want something like you. So you just want to make sure, to use that analogy I used earlier about plumbing services, you want to make sure that you are AAA plumbing services, the first one that comes up, so that they call you first and not double B plumbing services or whatever. So that said, and in comparison, social media and email marketing is you have to continuously contact those people over and over to get their business and remind them that you're a presence. And it's important to do, but it is a lot of continuous work, and therefore it's a lower ROI because that needs to be kept up, otherwise you get forgotten. But that being said, social media especially is factored into SEO and effectiveness in SEO. How, you may wonder? I will explain that. So my general recommendations for social media in general is to post regularly and consistently. By doing so, you are giving out a hint both to human visitors and bots that you are a business that is in operations, you are continuously updating. That implies that you're still in business. It does not look good to have a Facebook page where nobody has updated anything since 2012 or whatever you're working on. And there are some theories that interaction with your brand on the major social media platforms translates into trust. And therefore gives you higher rankings. I feel like it's more straightforward than that. It is simply, if I'm a human researcher and I'm deciding where I want to spend my money in a world of caveat emptor or buyer beware, if I go on Facebook, my preferred social media platform, and I see you as a business getting lots of contact and feedback from people on Facebook, I see that Anne-Marie stayed with you last year and she loved her stay and she told you why, and you responded back, hey, thanks, Anne-Marie, you're so cool. We can't wait to have you again. And then she says, oh my God, I just booked again because you're so wonderful. That implies that you are a good place for me to stay. because you exist. And Anne-Marie is a stranger, but she likes you. And more and more, I don't really get it, but it's getting to the point where people trust strangers online more so than they do their own family and friends. And they're more likely to go to a place like Yelp or TripAdvisor or any of the other review platforms and get recommendations on where to stay rather than ask someone they actually know and trust, which is crazy. But it's good to take advantage of because, the previous world of PR for a small business was that people, if you love a business, you'll tell 5 people, but if you hate a business, you'll tell 20. That still exists, but it's digitized now. So I posted a bunch of social media platforms. It can be overwhelming, but make sure that you are effective on whichever one you are using, and again, prioritize. Understand which one is important for you in terms of your target demographic. So if you are trying to target people like me, as I said before, I am a man in my 30s. I live in a fairly urban area. Urban in that regard, in terms of demographics, urban male millennials. I'm a millennial. The oldest millennial is actually 37, for those people who assume that it's just people straight out of college. They are more likely on Twitter. So if you want to get more of me, maybe it's important for you to be present on Twitter. I would not recommend it in general. For the hospitality industry, generally, I recommend Facebook first, and then another one on top of that, be it TripAdvisor, which is kind of a social platform, or Pinterest, or Google My Business. But the important thing is have a presence, because again, as I said, and especially as time goes on, more and more that will be factored in to search results. Next up, citations, which are not sexy, but they are very important. And what are citations? They are basically making sure that you are listed in directories throughout the web, and so that when somebody does the digital version of looking in the Yellow Pages, actually yellowpages.com exists and people do use it, they will find you in the same place that your competitors are listed. So if I go to Google My Business is a citation. It is basically just the Google's directory of businesses. That is the one I highly recommend you stay on top of, especially if you're focusing on organic search, and make sure that your hours are up to date, your name is consistent, your phone number is there, your address is there, and it's up to date, and whatever information they need in order to help people who want you find you. Again, it really is the equivalent of making sure you're listed in the Yellow Pages. And if you're overwhelmed by this, you should be. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of directories throughout the web where you could be listed. I would recommend prioritizing the national brands where people can and should be reviewing you. These are kind of consistent ones. Everybody knows of them. A lot of people are in the same circles, swim in the same circles, I should say. So again, number one I would recommend is Google My Business, and Facebook are two. And Facebook is a directory of sorts. Other ones for our industry specifically are Yelp and TripAdvisor. My experience historically was Yelp was more important for the West Coast, TripAdvisor for the East Coast. It's kind of crossing paths a lot. And it kind of just depends on wherever you see the most bang for your buck in terms of whatever you're investing into it, you get more money out of. A free tool to kind of track the effectiveness of citations is the Moz Local business listing, which is not specific to us. That is one limitation of it. It does just pull the national generic brands, but it doesn't include ones that are important to us as an industry like TripAdvisor, but it's still useful. And the next one in terms of cultivating trust that I highly recommend keeping an eye on is backlinks. Backlinks are still the number one most important thing in SEO. I would say they've been downgraded. Again, nobody knows the algorithm unless you work at Google, in which case I'd be worth a lot more than I am. But it's still important. It's basically just gone from being number one to one of three, site speed and quality of content being the other major two heavy hitters that I would recommend focusing on. But basically, backlinks are seen as a digital vote of confidence. So in the real world, if you got a backlink from Travel and Leisure magazine, for example, that would be akin to a personified Google or just a human visitor influencer that got invited to a lavish cocktail party at Travel and Leisure personified's home. And while they're walking around, they're checking out the hors d'oeuvres and whatever, and they overhear Travel and Leisure saying, oh, you know, John Smith's bed and breakfast in St. Louis, Missouri, that place is a wonderful place to stay, as they hold up their cocktail and talking to a large crowd of people. That will be, if Google were to overhear that, they'd say, oh yeah, I should definitely recommend that place more to people, because, you know, if Travel and Leisure feels very highly about it, so should I. There are a lot of sites like that out there, and of varying levels of authority. Generally, publications are viewed as high authority. Publications like New York Times, the Boston Globe, LA Times, Time Magazine, you know, whatever. If you respect the opinion of that site, likely Google respects the opinion of that site. Aim for the stars as far as that goes. If you know of a way to get the Boston Globe to write about you, go for it. But if you don't, there's a lot of other places to look for really high quality backlinks. Some ones that I recommend pretty consistently across the board are your town or city website, or the local chamber of commerce. The other one I very highly recommend is local universities and colleges. Most of them have a page on their site about accommodations, places to stay nearby when people are looking to visit. And in the SEO world, .gov and .edu backlinks are insanely valuable, because they are very high authority sites and they are kind of difficult to get a backlink from in the first place. So getting that backlink is a really good sign that you are a legit place. Other ones that I recommend, your local newspapers and magazines, as well as other well-established businesses. I'm not talking about another business that just opened up last year, unless they are backed by a larger, better known national brand. But you know, if there's another business that's been in existence for 10 or more years, generally those have a fairly decent authority value, and getting a link to, you know, linking to that site and getting a link from that site has more leverage than, you know, if you were to connect to a website that I just started this year and I blogged about you and said how great you are. If you're not sure about this, if you are a Q4Launch customer, you can always ask a CEM, your CEM. They will help you out with this and help guide you on whether that site's a good one to get a link from or not. And this is a pretty common question about social media, by the way. Posting to social media, as I said, is important, but it is not the equivalent of a backlink. Those links are all consistently no follow as opposed to follow. A link that is marked as follow is telling search engines to follow this link and find out where it's going, because I think that this is a very important page to go to. No follow is the opposite. Do not follow this link, i.e. it has no SEO value. That said, it's important to have a mix of both in your backlink portfolio. And that is as much as I'm going to get into that, because again, backlinks, I could go on forever about this. It's, you know, there's tons of research and knowledge related to this. So I'm going to move on. The other really important part of cultivating trust in your brand is reviews and managing your reviews. And I don't know where this gets factored into the Google specific search algorithm. I know I keep harping on Google, but you know, if it's 2/3 of searches, it's pretty important to focus on. But reviews are becoming more and more important. And this is, when you think about it, it makes sense, because if you are a business, let's say John Smith's Vacation Rentals in Branson, Missouri, if he has a lot of reviews on Google or TripAdvisor or wherever, or Yelp, or generally you want to mix, but if he has a lot of reviews, that implies that humans have shown up, they've stayed with him, and if so, even a 1-star review implies that he is a legit business, unless the review is about how he's not a legit business. That's a different story. But he is a legitimate business with a location and a place to do business. And you know, if you show up and pay him money, you will get something in return. If you get lots of 5-star reviews, well, that's obviously a whole lot better, because that also implies that, you know, in this case, I showed up, I stayed in Branson, Missouri, and I handed over money, and I was really happy with the money that I handed over. It was a really pleasurable experience in this case. And if you get 100 people saying how great your experience in Branson, Missouri with John Smith's Vacation Rentals, that implies that that's a really good business to spend your money. Reviews are becoming more and more important in terms of just the search aspect in researching a business. So, and in reality, to use John Smith's vacation rentals again, if he has 500 reviews and an average of 4.5 stars on Google, for example, and I'm searching in Google, would I stay with him or would I stay with Erica Johnson's vacation rental company, which has 5 stars and an average of 2? Sorry, she has 5 reviews and an average of 2 stars because they really cannot handle that bed bug issue or whatever the issue is. I do not stay in places if there's any mention of bed bugs. They creep me out. So personally, if you're trying to target me specifically, do not have bed bugs on your property. You probably don't want me staying with you because I'll be kind of particular, but that's the point. So again, I cannot emphasize this enough. Reviews are becoming more and more important, especially as time goes on. It's just another hint that you are a legitimate business and you want to do business with them. And we're actually seeing it starting this year. It is hard to target for best of anything anymore. It used to be a matter of you just sprinkle that keyword in among your content and you can rank for it. But now best is determined by reviews. So if you do a search, the example that I was shown in an article was like taco places in the Mission neighborhood of San Francisco. It was determined by reviews. So, whereas historically Taco Bell, which has a taco spot in the Mission district, they were pretty high because Taco Bell has a whole lot more money to leverage to market to optimize whatever page on the Taco Bell site is devoted to that specific restaurant. But now they're getting consistently outranked because their reviews are awful. Fast food. No shocker, but the small businesses that put a whole lot more effort per business into providing a great experience, both on-site and off-site, have better reviews. Therefore, they outrank Taco Bell for taco spot or whatever term you're looking for, places to eat with tacos in the Mission District of San Francisco. Yes, that is super not related to our industry, but it was an interesting one nevertheless. It's just funny to think that Taco Bell would think they could outcompete actual taco joints, but I probably should not say that. So I can use the same reference. Let me just recreate it for people who are not sure how that relates to them. Bed and breakfast in Philadelphia. It is the best one will be determined by reviews, and which is kind of cool when you think about it, because again, in that same instance, it is a lot easier to compete as a boutique hotel against the Marriott, which has a whole lot more money, if you are the best because your reviews are so much better than the Marriott in your town. So I believe, yeah, that's it for that. So review and wrap up. Again, the 7 things to focus on. First and foremost, and the most important thing is to focus what your marketing efforts and prioritize accordingly. Create measurable sub goals for success. Do your market research and put a lot of effort into your copy, i.e., your headlines, your meta descriptions, anything that's on your site written, as well as design, and then optimize your site for speed. Make sure it loads as quickly as it can and is easy to navigate. And then after that, focus on increasing trust in you and your brand via things like social media, citations, reviews, backlinks, any of that stuff. So the first 3 things I recommend that you focus on once you hit stop on this webinar is to create those goals, determine what will be measurable success for you. And then look in Google Analytics for what's not working towards those goals and make changes based on those goals and what's not obviously working. And if you need any help at all with that or planning out that strategy, you know who to get in touch with, us here at Q4Launch. And you have Matt's email on there, thank God. I would be difficult to get in touch with. As a millennial, I do not often pick up my phone, but I will if I have to. Anne-Marie will probably yell at me after this about that. But that is everything on my end.
Great. Well, we had a couple of questions. One, I think you already answered. People were, a question was about, is posting to social media help my SEO? And I think you answered that adequately. There's one thing, if you'll forgive me, I thought you made me think of this, Colin. When we talk about backlinks and we talk about, how to try and get people to link to your website, I think another great thing to look for is who is already linking to your website. You don't have to ask for it. They're already doing it. And is there a way that you can optimize whatever they're linking to or whatever it is that they're saying? And you just contact them and say, hey, I want to thank you for mentioning us. Would you mind using our proper title, or would you mind using this link to a page that's more specifically speaking to what you're talking about? So like, how do you just make that one stronger because they're already doing it?
So like to leverage it, and you're saying they've already linked to you, is that
Yeah,
right?
something's already linked to you. How can you optimize it?
So it, in reality, it's kind of difficult to force people to link to something. A lot of times I'm wary of pushing it because I don't want them to do the exact opposite response of unlinking entirely. So it depends. Like one really cool tactic I've heard of lately is to kind of do a Google search for your business name or your personal name, because your identity as a person is tied in with your business at some point, let's face it. And make sure that whoever has written about you or your business is linking to you in the first place. But if they've linked to you already, I mean, some simple stuff is to make sure that whatever page they're linking to is the best page for them to link to. So for example, if someone's linked to my site and they talk about coffee shops, and they're linking to an activities page, if I've written a blog about coffee shops in my area, you may actually be helping them by letting them know that that coffee shop blog exists, as an example. Also, make sure that that page loads quickly, because if somebody clicks on that link to your page and that individual page doesn't load, that backlink may prove to be useless, both for human visitors and bots. Or if it redirects a ton of times, that's also bad user experience. Again, it all goes back to user experience. And whatever is best for people in the first place.
Okay.
The other thing to leverage off of that would be to, as you said, get more backlinks from them. Like if a newspaper wrote an article about you and then 10 years later you reach out to them again to be like, hey, they write an article about you opening in the first place, and then 10 years later you're still in business, that's news. And that may be really cool for them to do an update of like, hey, they're still in business. Isn't that cool? Especially in in the U.S. industry or the U.S. market, where lots of businesses go under before the 10-year mark. Just as an example, it's as one of my colleagues here who has a journalism background pointed out, like, it is a matter of gauging what is news. So like, you existing as a business is not news. You hiring a manager, not news. A new manager is not news. But you being in business for 10 years or 20 or 30, that's news. That's definitely something that newspapers and especially would want to write about.
Great. Okay, one other question was they were just kind of wondering about how you see AdWords fitting into the whole effort around SEO.
Good question. So Google has officially come out. When I say Google, it's not like Google officially says something like the Google Twitter account or something like that. I mean, like Matt Isles, like the major people who are voices of Google itself. They have come out and they've said that AdWords does not affect rankings in SEO. And that makes sense, because they don't want there to be any risk at all of there being a perception of pay for play, or that, if you just pay Google more money, you'll get to the first row of the search engine results pages. So it's important in terms of getting traffic to a site, and it's important in terms of you get a faster response. Like, let's face it, SEO is a very slow process. Generally the sites that are number one in results have been around as businesses and as domains for sometimes decades. And also getting to that level, as I said, these 7 little things are not little. It is a lot of work to be effective at SEO. But a paid ad campaign will get you to the top of the results, because if you are in the number 1 through 3 slot of paid search for a keyword, that means that you are if you do a Google search on a desktop computer, you are going to be the top 3 results, and then below that are going to be the top organic results. They're slightly different. So that just means you just pay money up front to be top results. Whereas in organic search, it's you put a lot more work up front in order to get to that point. But then once you're there, it's free. Your presence there is simply you've done a good job of getting yourself there, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Perfect. Okay. And we have one last question. We can wrap it up. The last question is about duplicate content, and I think a good way to answer this is with our speaking about citations. If we've got, if we're saying the exact same thing in every citation, how do you get punished for that?
So again, like everything else on here, there are a lot of things people are fairly confident about based off of experience and experimentation, but not necessarily things that they know for a fact. Because Google does not want their search algorithm shared everywhere, because then the entire business model could just be copied by somebody with very deep pockets. But that being said, duplicate content, the general recommendation is you want to make sure that you only have about 25%, 30% is pushing it of your content is the same on different pages. And that's throughout the web. That's not just your site. Like if you have one page and another page says about the same thing, you don't want it to look like you've basically just copied and pasted. At the same time, that's true for other sites. So it's not necessarily, you won't know that you've been, the term that I use all the time is Google slapped, i.e. Google punishes you for duplicate content in this case. You won't know that you've been Google slapped until it's too late, and it's very difficult to get yourself out of that position. But you won't notice until no organic searches arrive on a page on your site, for example. But in a lot of cases, it's more that, if you have two pages on your site and they both have the same content, Google will just decide which page to push people to. Again, this is all search engine optimization. It is optimizing individual pages on your site. So if, and they may decide that the page that you don't want to be the top result is the one that they're going to push people to. So you lose a bit of your control over that. To continue to use that analogy, let's say if you have a vacation rental site, for example, and you have a unit and it has a specific name, and you know that people will do a Google search for the name of your vacation rental unit. If you have that same content on HomeAway and Expedia, we'll say it's all over the place. It's HomeAway, it's VRBO, and your site. If it's the same content on all of those, again, HomeAway and VRBO are probably higher authority sites than yours is. So you risk those sites out competing you in Google search results simply because they have more content. But the one thing in their that's factored into that result is that they are a higher authority website than yours. So you kind of risk shooting yourself in the foot just because it was easier to copy and paste that day and just throw something up as opposed to just changing it. That being said, it may, keep in mind, I use a lot of vague things when I'm saying this. It may be enough to just adjust the wording of whatever you're saying. I would recommend just making sure, when possible, to just have different content on the site, just so that you're not competing against yourself. But in reality, it's not the end of the world. If you're top 3 results for the same property, it's all money in your pocket eventually. It's just, in this case, if the booking goes to HomeAway first, you get a smaller percentage of that booking, but because they'll take their cut, which not the end of the world.
Okay, well, thanks. Those are the questions we had. And then I'd just like to leave you guys. I'm sure you're very inspired now to wonder how you're doing in your SEO. So we have an SEO marketing grader that we'd like to offer as a free tool. Just go ahead and let us know. We will perform the tool and we'll schedule time with you and take you through the results. And honestly, what it'll be is like, here's 3 things to do. I just performed one of these the other day. And there was a guy who had none of his images were optimized. And by just fixing one picture, he could solve like 80% of that one issue of page load speed and optimization of images. So sometimes we can find a nugget that's just like one little thing that's going to make a big difference for you. So go ahead and take advantage of that. We'll send this recording out, and you'll be able to respond to that email with a request for an SEO marketing grader, and we'd be happy to do that for you. So I want to thank you for joining us. And Colin, I want to thank you for sharing all of your heart and passion around SEO. I think this is really newsworthy and helpful for everybody who joined us. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks for everyone's time.
Okay. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.